In this lesson, we're going to look at basic animation inside of Blender using keyframes. So first of all, let's delete our light and our camera from the scene, and we're just going to animate this cube, and let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to expand our timeline here at the bottom. I'm just going to pull it up slightly so we can see the timeline a bit better. And now what I want to do is I want to animate this cube so it moves from the left of the screen towards the right of the screen. So what I want to do is make sure you're on frame number 1, so you can click and drag this playhead, or you can just use this little number here and type in 1 to jump to frame 1. And then I want to move the cube on the x-axis, on the red axis, towards the left side of the screen. So I'm going to press GX and just pull it this way and click there to confirm. Now let's create a keyframe for the position of this cube in this location. So with the cube selected, press I for insert keyframe. So that's the shortcut I, and here it will give you all the different keyframes that you can create for that specific object. So we just want to animate the location for now. So you can see right at the top, you'll see location. If I click this, you will see that it's going to create a keyframe on frame number 1 here in the timeline. You can see there's the keyframe. Now I want to go over and let's go to frame 100. So drag your keyframe or the playhead to frame 100, and then with the cube selected, press GX and move it to the other side of the screen. Now we want to create a new keyframe for this object on frame 100. So simply press I to bring up the insert keyframe menu, and we're going to choose location again. And now you can see it's created a second keyframe on frame number 100. So now if I scrub through this timeline, you can see that we have some sort of animation, because Blender will fill in all the in-betweens between these two keyframes. So let's go to the first frame and then press space on the keyboard to play the animation. Let's do that again. Another shortcut to go back to the first frame is to press Shift and left arrow on the keyboard. Press space again to play back the animation. So we've basically created 2 location keyframes. Now you can also highlight one of these keyframes and press G to grab that keyframe and move it around. Let's say you want the animation to end at frame 200. You can simply just move that keyframe, and now if I play this back, you'll see that our animation is much slower because it's running over 200 frames. You can also move the first keyframe if you want to. We can say let's start it at frame 50. So now if we play this back, nothing will happen until it gets to frame 50. Then it's going to start moving all the way to frame 200. Okay, let's delete these keyframes. So I'm going to just drag a box around both of these keyframes in the timeline, press X, and then delete keyframes. Now if we scrub through the timeline, nothing will happen. So let's create a rotation keyframe. So let's snap this object back to the middle of our world. So with the cube selected, press Shift S to bring up the snapping menu, and then select selection to cursor to just move our cube back to the 3D cursor, which is in the center of the world. So first of all, let's create a rotation keyframe. So with the cube selected, press I to bring up the insert keyframe menu, and this time we're going to select rotation. So it's created a rotation keyframe right there on frame 1. Now let's go to frame 100, and now I'm going to rotate the cube. So let's just zoom out slightly. Let's press R and let's just rotate it a few times like that. Click to confirm that, and now we need to insert a new keyframe. So press I and then select rotation. Now I'll see it will create a new keyframe in the timeline, and if we play this back from frame 1 by pressing space, you'll see that we have that rotation animation. Now again, you can move this keyframe around by pressing G. let's say we move it to frame 200, now the animation will play a lot slower because it's covering more frames. We can also keyframe scale, so I'm going to delete these two keyframes again by pressing X, delete keyframes, and this time we're going to create a keyframe on frame 1, but we're going to select scale to create a scale keyframe. So now let's go over to frame 100, let's scale this cube up, press I to insert a new keyframe and select scale. Now you can see if we play this back, we have a scale animation. Let's delete both these keyframes. So I'm just dragging a box, X, delete keyframes, and let's see how we can combine keyframes for location, rotation, and scale. So I'm going to move this cube off to the side again. So I'm going to press GX, move it to the side, and this time I want to insert a location, rotation, and scale keyframe. So with the cube selected, press I, and you'll see that we have more options down here. So you'll see there's one that says location, rotation, and scale. So select that one to create a keyframe for location, rotation, and scale. You can also see here on the side, if you're on the object properties menu, these values will turn yellow because that means they are keyframed for location, rotation, and scale. So now let's go to frame 100, and I'm going to move the cube to the other side of the screen. So GX, move it this way. Now I want to rotate this cube as well. So I want to rotate it on the X axis. So I'm going to press R for rotate, and then Z to rotate it around the Z axis. And I'm just going to rotate it a few times like that. Just click to confirm that. And then I also want to scale it. So I want to make it bigger. So I'm going to press S, scale it bigger, click to confirm. Now we need to insert a new keyframe. So I'm going to press I, and then I'm going to select location, rotation, and scale because we want to animate all three of those parameters. So you can see we've got the keyframe there. Let's go back to frame 1 by pressing Shift left arrow and then press space to play the animation. And now you can see it's actually animating the location, the rotation, and the scale. You can also set the end of your animation if you adjust this end value. So currently we've got keyframe on frame 1 and frame 100. And let's say we want that to be our complete or final duration. We can set the end keyframe to 100. And now you can see it's going to highlight only that part. And if I play this back, it's going to loop frame 1 to 100. You can use the same navigation to move around the timeline. So if I hold in Shift and middle mouse, I can pan. If I hold in Control and middle mouse, I can zoom in and out. And yeah, you can either just hold in the middle mouse button to pan around and then hold in Control. So you don't really have to hold in Shift. You can also copy and paste keyframes. So let's say you want your animation to start off and then do like a loop. So it's going to go to the right hand side of the screen and then move back again. So what we can do is we can move our end keyframe, just select the end keyframe on frame 100. Let's move that to frame 50. So it's in the kind of in the middle of our duration. So if I play this back, you'll see that it goes quickly to frame 50 and then it will stop. Now what you can do is we can take this keyframe on frame 1. So it's got the location, the rotation, and the scale of this object. We can copy that. So just drag a box around it, copy, so Control C, and then go to the frame where you want to paste it, frame 100, and then do Control V. Now you can see we've pasted a new keyframe there, and if we play this back from the beginning, you'll see that our animation will now loop. Depending on your preferences inside of Blender, you might see something that's not smooth like this. You can see the cube is kind of changing direction instantly, or you might see a smoother movement. Now, if we quickly look at the Blender preferences, edit and preferences, and we go to the animation tab, you'll see there's a default interpolation mode. And there's quite a few options here, but we're only going to focus on two, linear and Bezier. Now, I've changed mine to linear, but yours might be set to Bezier. Let's leave it on whatever setting it is for now, but I just want to show you where you can actually change the default. Mine is set to linear, which means I get this very kind of snappy animation. It's not very smooth. But if I want to change these keyframes from linear to Bezier, let's select them all, right click, go to interpolation mode, and I'm going to change it to Bezier. Now if I play it back, you'll see it's going to kind of go smooth back and forth because it's got a curve. You can visualize this if we click on this little icon here in the corner of the timeline, and if we change this to the graph editor, you can see that we've got these smooth looking graphs. Now I'm not going to go into details how to use the graph editor. You can obviously go and play around with this. It's quite powerful because you can do all kinds of crazy curves, but for now let's stay in the timeline. So just click on that little icon again, go to timeline to go back to this view. So let's say your default setting is on Bezier, you will see something like this, but yeah, that's all depending on the preferences inside of Blender, what this value is set to, this default interpolation. But you can obviously switch between them as I just showed you. So let's say now it's set to Bezier, it's nice and smooth, but if I want to change it to linear, I can just select those keyframes, right click, interpolation mode, and set them to linear. And now if I play this back, you'll get that snappy animation again where it's not very smooth. You can obviously change the interpolation just between two certain keyframes, so you don't have to select all of them. I can only select these two keyframes coming back, right click interpolation mode, and let's set that to Bezier. And now it's going to do a snappy movement, and it's going to kind of slowly move back. That ending part's going to kind of go smooth. So you can decide exactly how you want your animation to play back using the interpolation modes. You can also select the keyframes and then press S to scale, and it will scale it like that. If you wanted to scale kind of in the middle, just put the playhead there and scale again, and now I can see it's scaling the two side keyframes inwards. Let's set them all to interpolation mode Bezier and see how that affects it. So you can see it's a little bit of a different movement. So that's the basics of adding animation keyframes inside of Blender. I will see you in the next lesson.